My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. I've shared before on Destination Unlimited that self-worth was an issue for me growing up. A series of events wired my young mind into believing that my worth was predicated on what I could do for others. I became a people pleaser to reinforce this belief, often leaving myself feeling empty and worthless. All of that changed in my mid-30s when a series of wonderful teachers helped me to find my essence, balance, and worth. Many are struggling with the same issues today. Fear, anxiety, and hopelessness have tainted the lives of those who have lost touch with the basic joy and peace that is inherent in each and every one of us, that is our birthright. How may we see past the web of illusion that has been spun to block this truth and find our essential selves are perfect and boundless as they are? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Panache Desai, has lived this experience and emerged with a deep and profound understanding of who we truly are. Panache Desai is a visionary thought leader and life catalyst in the area of human development, whose loving, compassionate presence and unique power of insight have transformed countless individuals, organizations, and companies. Panache has appeared with Oprah Winfrey on her Emmy Award-winning Super Soul Sunday and has collaborated alongside Deepak Chopra, steps in for Reverend Michael Bernard Begwith at the Agape International Spiritual Center, and has worked with Neil Donald Walsh, Joe Dispenza, Brian Weiss, the late Ram Dass, James Redfield, and other luminaries in the fields of spiritual and personal development. He's the author of the best-selling and widely praised first book, Discover Your Soul Signature. His website is panachedesai.com, and he joins me this week to discuss his just-published and revelatory book, You Are Enough: Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Panache Desai.
My friend, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to be here with you.
And thank you so much for joining us and sharing this very, very important and essential work. Let's start out with when you were a child. You discovered that you were born with the ability to sense the emotions and energy of others. When did you first realize what this was like?
So we're now beginning to realize that what happens in the first 7 years of life is crucial and critical, because it can either form impressions inside of us that are life-affirming, or it can form impressions inside of us that lead us to undermine who we are at every turn. And I was blessed enough to be raised by my grandmother, a deeply spiritual lady. She would pray, she would meditate every day, she would chant in Sanskrit, and she would read from the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, and all of the sacred texts of India. And so my immersion from my inception was into a state of presence and spirituality, not just as a level of understanding, but as a felt way of experiencing life and reality. And so, just like all of us, deeply connected to my essence. And then at a certain point, we begin to question. And for me, my childhood was a very interesting one. I always felt very strange and very weird. I was having experiences that I couldn't reconcile because I was in this state of presence and oneness. I was experiencing everything in everybody that I was with as if it was inside of myself. And as a child, because I hadn't developed the maturity necessary to deal with that level of empathy or to deal with that level of sensitivity, quite honestly, it was just overwhelming. And coupled by that, people were having experiences around me of just coming to sit next to me. And all of a sudden, they'd just share their life story with me. They'd unburden themselves emotionally, and they would get up in what I would call at that particular point in my life as sparkly. And so all in all, it was a very unique childhood, at least on the level of context and circumstance. However, my story is not too dissimilar than anybody else's story, because basically we're here, we're connected to our essence. Eventually what happens is we at some point don't feel safe in who we are, and we begin this crusade through accomplishment, through achievement, in trying to prove that we're lovable, in trying to prove that we're good enough. And so that's kind of how it began. And I'm happy to say that throughout the course of this journey, and as I've outlined in the book, I've been able to get to a place now where I'm able to truly just relax into whatever's happening and to be able to be of service in a deeper and meaningful way without being afraid.
It's fascinating to me that your experience with your grandmother's spirituality was very much like my experience with my paternal grandfather's spirituality. What was it like to be in her presence? And what would you say to others who really didn't have any type of a spiritual background or upbringing?
I think for me, the core essence of this experience was primarily because this was my destiny. It arranges itself in absolute perfection to get you to be and to have you be who you're meant to be in order to deliver a message or deliver some body of work into the world. And for me, because my path was one of being in this spiritual capacity, of reminding people of who they really are, of guiding people into a deeper truth. Of course, my formative years were all geared toward that. What I would say to people is that we all, at our core, have this essence, and that regardless of what our journey has been, regardless of how we've lived, our early formative years, impressions, and indeed we call them samskaras, are the entry points into that essence, are the entry points into that presence, beyond social conformity, beyond our programming, beyond roles, beyond expectations, beyond responsibilities. And so regardless of where you are in your journey and how you were raised, please know that you are hearing these words to be guided to a truth that has the ability to transform the way you see yourself and live your life. And most importantly of all, to uncouple you from a lie that you are not enough. In that transformation, all of a sudden you're able to relax into this state of presence within. And from that place, you're able to experience heightened synchronicity, and you're also able to detach from all of the reactivity and all of the personalization that's the root cause of human suffering.
And this is something that really came to fore in your youth as you were growing up in London's East End during the 1980s. Please share your story with our listeners.
So East London was very survival-based. It was a wonderful place to grow up. However, everyone, the dominant energy was survival. And in East London, it was more a case of survival of the fittest. And it was absolutely the opposite environment of that meditation room that formed the formative kind of cocoon of my life. And I subsequently, being immersed in this kind of dualistic way of being between the reality of living in East London and the calm and serenity of being in the meditation room, at certain points had gone through certain experiences that had me question my safety, had me question who I was. And so, of course, we all begin to then try to fit in. And as much as I tried to fit in and tried to belong, I couldn't. And this had led to the accumulation of suffering inside of myself. And this accumulation of suffering kind of peaked about the age of about 21 for me. I had gotten to a point where I had realized that I was fundamentally living a lie. And I sat down with my mother and just looked her in her eyes and held her hands and just said, "Mom, I have to go away and get back to live like a monk again." I said, "I want to live like a monk for 6 months." And I said, "I have to get back to the feeling that I had in that meditation room growing up, because that's why I'm here." And so my immersion into proving that I was somebody, proving that I was lovable, proving that I was deserving, was a deeply compact, deeply powerful experience. Because I could literally go through every form of suffering and every form of separation that we experience as human beings in a compressed window of time. And of course, my mother sat down with me. She knew that at some point I was going to have this conversation with her. She just didn't think that it was going to happen at the age of 21. And so my mother, thankfully, said, "Sure, where are you going to go? You're going to go to India, you're going to go to America." And I said, "I'd love to go to America, Mom." And so I began to, in those 6 months, unwind all of the survival-related instincts, all of the survival-related energies that I had accumulated inside of myself. And that unwinding in the presence of that safety, of that meditation room, of that meditative environment, of that place that felt so familiar, allowed me to evolve, allowed me to develop, allowed me to move beyond who I thought I needed to be in order to find a sense of belonging and acceptance outside of myself.
And it was like a return to your grandmother's meditation room.
Yes, absolutely. I think that at some point we all have to return to that original feeling of safety, whatever that is for you. It could be your mother's meditation room. In your case, it could be your paternal grandfather's spirituality. All of us at some point have to return to that space where we feel enough, where we feel safe, where we have this place of belonging inside.
There is a song that is sung amongst certain Jewish communities, and in essence, the lyric says, "Return to the home of your soul." This is what we're talking about.
That's beautiful.
And this is
exactly
what we're talking about, yes.
That's
Getting
exactly
back to the essence of who we were before the troubles of the world began to taint that experience. My guest this week, Panache Desai. He's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. We'll be back with more of Panache after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Roll up to the Mystical Minds Convention. Step right this way. Coming March 28th and 29th in Newark, California, just south of San Francisco, the first annual Mystical Minds Convention. Founded by Melanie Marquis, Mystical Minds is a new pagan, paranormal, and metaphysical convention created to expand our minds as well as our networks. Enjoy a weekend of fun, learning, and making connections in a comfortable and welcoming space that fosters unity by honoring the diversity of minds, bodies, and spirits. This is Victor the Voice Fuhrman, and I am honored to be a featured presenter and panelist. For more information and to register, visit mysticalmindsconvention.com and roll up for the Mystical Minds Convention. Step right this way.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human. And she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Panache Desai. He's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. So you had mentioned at age 21 sitting down with your mom and deciding that you were going to move back into a place that would give you a return to your spiritual essence and beginning. But from reading your bio, you had two challenging and life-threatening events that took place and changed your life before that happened. What were those events?
So I had in East London, as a way of finding a sense of belonging in life in general, got involved in the music industry. And at that point, London had a very thriving underground music scene. And so basically all of the best music was happening in underground clubs or after-hours clubs. And more often than not, there was a certain level of violence that accompanied the genre. And I remember one night I'd gone out and was in a bar, and I just happened to be Indian in the wrong place at the wrong time. And three individuals had taken exception to the fact that I was there and just decided to hurl racial slurs and started laying into me. And thankfully, I knew the bouncers that were there, and the bouncers knew who I was and knew who my friends were, and intervened and pulled them off of me. Now, you would think that that would be enough to have you realize that you should probably go home. But in my stubborn hard-headedness, I decided to continue to go out and ended up in an after-hours place. And lo and behold, there had been a shooting before we'd gotten there. And at a certain point, an altercation ensued in the club, and there was a certain point where guns were drawn. And in that moment, again, just the very dangerous, unpredictable nature of my reality had made itself evident to me. And subsequently, what ensued was that the Metropolitan Police Department, SWAT department, had surrounded the club, and they wouldn't come inside because what they didn't want was any kind of a hostage situation or any kind of a shootout. So everyone was escorted one by one outside of the club. This went on for hours. And in that moment, I realized very quickly that in continuing to pursue this passion of music and in continuing to put myself and my life in jeopardy in order to pursue it, at some point, I wasn't going to walk away from it. That something would happen eventually, and that it would mean that I would be physically, severely injured for the duration of my life, or that it would even potentially cost me my life. And this wake-up call, this awakening into the harsh reality of the circumstance that I had made familiar, prompted me to go about making this shift. And yeah.
Yeah, so you had these experiences, you had this realization, you had your conversation with your mother at age 21, and what was the next step that took you back into the realm of spirituality?
So before I was born, my mother had been to see a guru in India, in Ganeshpuri, which is a village in India, and there's a very famous Siddha guru who had been there called Nityananda, and Nityananda was an avadut, complete renunciant, completely absorbed and lost in God, and miracles would happen all around him. And so because my mother had lost a baby girl before she had me, that she'd carried full term, when she was 2 months pregnant with me, she went to Ganeshpuri to be blessed for my birth. And there was a guru there at the time called Swami Muktananda who had blessed me in the womb at 3 months old, and basically told my mother that my role would be to come back to help facilitate the shift in consciousness in some way. So my mother, upon hearing my plea to get back to that space of being in this meditative environment, wasn't shocked when it happened, thankfully. Like she knew it was coming. And my choice to go to America was a very simple one. He had spent a lot of time there and actually had a room on the second floor that was very private. Nobody ever went there, where his chair was and his sandals were. His sandals are the sandals are always revered because every energetic channel in the human body converges in our feet. And so his sandals were there, his peacock feathers were there, and he was a very famous guru. And basically, for me, it was about reconnecting with him, because I always felt like he was my spiritual father. I had never had a relationship with a physical guru or teacher, but I had always had a connection with him. And even growing up in the meditation center, there were pictures of him on the walls and Bhagwan Nityananda on the walls. And we had a pair of his sandals in our home in London. And every day we would chant Arti, which is a beautiful devotional prayer. And on the weekends we would have satsang, which is an opportunity for people to come to pray, to chant, to meditate together. And we extended that out to the community. And so I went to a place up in the Catskills, which is where this ashram was. And honestly, it was an absolutely lousy yogi. I would wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go to morning arti and would fall asleep in the meditation room and start snoring. And and of course, laying on my back, pretending I was in a shavasana, and little by little, thankfully, through the grace of this lineage and this transformative power that facilitates kind of the alchemical evolution of who we are from the material back into the spiritual, I began to reconnect with my gifts and abilities and who I was. And so through that reconnection, began to once again become very, very fully and very intimately reacquainted with all of the gifts and all of the abilities and all of the phenomenon that was happening around me in my childhood.
They talk about the sleeping saint. I guess you were the sleeping yogi, huh?
You know, I guess I kind of was lousy, honestly. Like if there was such a thing as guru school, I absolutely would have failed it. And I couldn't imagine what all of these other people that were in this room were thinking. I mean, you know, here I am, Indian. They want a lot of Indians there, so I'm Indian. I'm there, fourth generation of this lineage and this tradition, and I'm like in a shavasana, just snoring. I mean, it's just hysterical. You know, it's just unbelievable.
Would have been interesting if they all started emulating you, thinking that was the right practice.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's so funny. So how has your realization of the creative energy within all of us affected your relationships and your interactions with others?
Well, it's very hard to unwind revelations that you have on an individual level. And for me, the most powerful revelatory experience that I had was one where I was actually had moved to America subsequently after being at the ashram, and I was in Venice, California on my sofa about 2002, 2003, New Year's Eve. And I had gotten to this place of frustration where I'd been told my whole life that I was here to do something, but I just didn't believe it. I believed that I was flawed and there was no way that God would choose somebody like me, and this is just ridiculous. And you know, and I just didn't believe it. And I had gotten to a point of frustration in my life where I literally just called out God and I said, all right, listen, if you exist, whatever you are, because I was still undecided, I couldn't reconcile a lot of what was happening in the name of God, then I have to experience who or what you are, because I'm not going to be this messenger and look at a mother who's lost her child in her eyes and tell her that there's some perfection to this unless I can experience that truth. And all of a sudden, I began to experience wave after wave of emotion, wave after wave of limitation that I'd accumulated. And through this journey, once all of this had finished, I got to this place where everything just disappeared into this golden light. It was just this infinite presence of light. And the feeling associated with it was love, but beyond the human definition of the word, it doesn't do it justice. And in that moment, I was shown very clearly that this is who we all are. This is where we come from. This is what we return to. And this is what we're here to embody. And that's what this whole thing is about. And that every rule and prerequisite and requirement had been created by human beings. None of that was of this divine presence. And as much as it was an experience that I was having of this energy around me, or this field of awareness around me, it was inside of me and it was inside of everything. That experience led to about a 3 to 6 month period of just being in bliss. I literally was just in a state where everything was just shimmering with this golden light. And at that point in Venice, California, Venice was still pretty gang infested. There was a homeless situation there, garbage everywhere. I mean, it wasn't what you would necessarily have be the setting for this kind of an awakening, on this kind of an experience. But everything had a light to it. Everything had a presence to it. And eventually, after this kind of period of integration, it became my new normal. And that moment for me clearly had me see why everything had happened in my life, who I was here to become, why I was here. But that didn't by any means mark the end of the journey. It began the beginning of an even deeper journey of doing the laundry, of resolving everything inside of myself on an unconscious level, as well as collectively resolving things on the unconscious level of who we are as human beings as a whole.
Is that experience what has been called Samadhi?
That experience is an awakening into Samadhi. Yes, absolutely. Because that experience, in the presence of that kind of an experience, you can no longer deny who you are and why you're here. The subsequent period of integration that ensued led to Samadhi. So there's a moment where we're reacquainted with the soul, which is a moment of self-realization. Samadhi, for me, is then the period of integration that ensues that leads to self-actualization, where we're able to actually embody that potential in every moment of our lives.
So we have the awakening, and then we have taking the awakening and putting it into action.
Yes, sir. That's exactly it.
My guest is Panache Desai. He's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. Panache, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work and your upcoming appearances.
My book's available through all independent bookstores, so please support your local bookstore. It's also available through Amazon or the big box retailers. You can also go to my website, which is panachedesai.com, PANACHEDESAI.com, and there's a link that says book, and there's all kinds of wonderful bonuses that have been put together. Also, I will be traveling extensively, and I'm very honored to say that I'll be coming back to Omega in June. And so if you are in the Rhinebeck area or anywhere in the Hudson Valley and would love to come and be reacquainted with this fundamental truth, please come and join me. I would love to meet you and see you.
And we'll be back with more of Panache Desai and You Are Enough after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Okay, men, time to be an all-star caregiver. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments, be there emotionally and physically. Don't give up. Don't ever give up.
Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find care guides at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Panache Desai. He's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. So, Panache, please tell us, what is the essential self, and how did you become aware of yours?
So the essential self is that part of us that never changes. It's the eternal part of us. It's the aspect of us that is the truth of who we are. And I found it through realizing that I never lost it. that as much as trauma happens, as much as life happens, abuse happens, bullying happens, fear, lack, and scarcity happens, pain happens, that this essential truth remains the foundational experience that every single human being has access to in every moment. And so right now, in this moment, as you are hearing these words, you too have access to this place of this essential self. And how we begin to become reacquainted with it again is simply through, first of all, remembering that it's there and then relaxing into it. And there are lots of different entry points that we can use to do that. But one of the most profound entry points that I've discovered is to be able to accept our life as it is. Most people think of yoga in terms of physical movements or breathwork, pranayama, or inquiry, or different things that we engage in. But really, when we look at the essence of the word yoga, what we're really talking about is love, is union, is cultivating this awareness at the level of the heart, of the oneness of all life. And the fastest way to return to that state of oneness, of connection, of peace, is through observing yourself without judgment, observing your life without judgment. Because when we speak in terms of the soul or the essential self, this is an aspect of us that exists without preference, without choice. It is just pure presence and potential. And the very second we can take a breath, or we can just even remember that we have this peace inside of us, the peace that passes all understanding, we begin to cultivate this ability to live in this state of Samadhi, because we begin to realize that it's possible in every moment to think, move, and act from this place of peace.
Why would you say that many of us tend to move away from our authentic selves?
Well, we move away from our authentic selves because it's not valued and nurtured in society. We, from the moment we're born, have been programmed and conditioned to be somebody other than ourselves. So, for example, at home, by virtue of the fact that we're empathic, our father is, in theory, supposed to model to us what safety is. The problem is that if dad's riddled with rage, then all of a sudden we have to hold on to rage in order to feel safe in this world. Mum is supposed to model love. However, if mum's riddled with anxiety, fear, or depression, then all of a sudden we start to model anxiety, fear, and depression as love. So it begins at home, and it's all unconscious and generational. Then beyond that, we end up in the school system. And the school system is designed for one purpose and one purpose alone. It's to make you a docile and compliant member of the workforce. That's all it's for. The more you can listen, the more you can comprehend, the more you can act on what you're being told to do, exactly how you're being told to do it, the more you advance. And then there's life, right? So all of a sudden we end up in peer groups and society. There are cultural norms, there are societal norms, but all of these things become boxes, or they become a part of our greater prison that we live inside of. And so it's through our disconnection from our essential self, through this lie that we're not enough in some way, and then the pursuit of trying to prove that we are, that we get lost in this world. And the only problem is that all of these false promises of fame, success, and money, or whatever these things are that are dangled in front of us, are just so empty and vacuous that even if we attain them, the only thing that's left is this emptiness, is this just soulless way of living. And eventually, the suffering that accumulates inside of us leads us to a point of conscious awakening or decision, and often that comes through crisis. For most, it comes through crisis. Otherwise, it comes through some kind of spontaneous awakening. But either way, life will facilitate our return back toward our essential self, and back toward who we authentically are, if we allow it to.
And this inauthenticity affects the choices we make in terms of career, relationships, friendships.
Yeah, it affects everything. You know, for me, I even my choice to go to university and take a degree that I didn't even want to do, law and business studies, because of my grandfather. And so it's so insidious as to how this plays out, because all of a sudden it becomes about this facade or this image that we've created, as opposed to what truly resonates with who we are at the level of the heart. In that instance, for example, I wanted to study philosophy. Makes perfect sense now. But I was talked out of it by my grandfather, because he just said to me, well, what are you going to do with that? And how are you going to support a family with a philosophy degree? And of course, now it makes perfect sense that I would want to study philosophy, because I always had this yearning to discover the deeper meaning of life and who we are as human beings and how we navigate this reality of being human. And so inauthenticity is the root cause of all human suffering. But the irony is that suffering in and of itself is entirely inauthentic.
How may we realign with the energy of our authentic selves?
So there are lots of different ways to do it, but for me, as it began and as it unfolded, I had to begin to come into the acceptance of myself, which is the opposite of what the world wants us to do, right? So the world is constantly pushing us to improve, pushing us to become better. We're on this hamster wheel of kind of willing our way beyond our limitations. And I realized at a certain point that my humanity was the doorway to my divinity. And the more I could begin to meet these aspects of myself without judgment, the more I could begin to be available for my anger, be available for my rage, be available for my insecurity, be available for all of these things that we accumulate inside of us because we've deemed them to be less than or wrong, the more I was creating an opening inside of myself to bring them into the heart. And in doing so, all of these qualities that we have deemed to be lower or less than transform. And in that transformation, we're freed of the need to recycle experiences, to recycle relationships, to recycle work or career opportunities or lack thereof, or financial situations or circumstances or health issues. So it's through our willingness to first of all accept ourselves as we are that we begin to all of a sudden relax into this peace and this presence that's always available to us, that's always there, that's just wanting us to finally soften into it once more and become absorbed by it fully and completely.
In You Are Enough, you share that by achieving our essential selves, we can develop a broader and more inclusive view, and you refer to that as consciousness at 30,000 feet. What is that, and why is it important?
So most of us right now in life, the reason why we're afraid and the reason why we're going without things is because we have this kind of, let's imagine that we're living in this 33-story apartment building, but most of us are only in the first 3 floors of that building. And so our ability to see and perceive is drastically limited. The more we accept ourselves and the more we embrace ourselves, the more we're able to move higher and higher up. And then at that point, what happens is we're able to see the perfection of life unfolding in its totality. And that's a huge sentence. But what I want people to know is that the same energy and the same intelligence that created you is in this moment animating all of life. And there's nothing that can happen that's outside of that. Even those things that we consider to be horrible or terrible are in some way playing a part in facilitating the awakening of who we are to the essence of truth of why we've come here. And so living from 30,000 feet means being able to see the totality of what's unfolding in our lives, but being able to meet all of that from a place of alignment, coherence, and congruence.
Why do you think it is that before this realignment, that before this vision of seeing each and everything as part of the one collective, of the one divine, the one all, why is there so much divisiveness in our world today?
Because the world has to mirror out greater and greater levels of polarity in order for us to finally wake up to the truth that what is being reflected back to us is who we are. So one of my favorite attractions when I was a kid at the local state fair was the Hall of Mirrors. It's my favorite thing. And I loved it because I realized that no matter what I was looking at, whether it was a shrunken head and large body and skinny legs, or super long arms and this huge head, that it was always just me, and that I was only ever interacting and interfacing with myself. And so the degree to which we have been unable to look in the mirror and be accountable and responsible for both the projection and the reflection is the degree to which we have become polarized as a society. And those aspects of us have become heightened and more pronounced in order for us to once again look in the mirror. Because what I realized is that the more I had the capacity to look in the mirror and to embrace who I was, the more the mirror smashed. And the more light, love, potential, and energy was available to me.
And do you see a path to us returning to that connection?
It begins now through your hearing this message and committing and making the conscious decision to live peacefully inside of yourself. Because the power of you returning to this truth of being enough and living from that space of connection literally has the capacity to ripple out to everyone in your life, everyone that you know and love and beyond, because we are interconnected. We're living in this collective tapestry of humanity, and we have the capacity to literally be that change in this world that we wish to see.
Absolutely. My guest, Panache Desai, he's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. We'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Roll up to the Mystical Minds Convention. Step right this way. Coming March 28th and 29th in Newark, California, just south of San Francisco, the first annual Mystical Minds Convention. Founded by Melanie Marquis, Mystical Minds is a new pagan, paranormal, and metaphysical convention created to expand our minds as well as our networks. Enjoy a weekend of fun, learning, and making connections in a comfortable and welcoming space that fosters unity by honoring the diversity of minds, bodies, and spirits. This is Victor the Voice Fuhrman, and I am honored to be a featured presenter and panelist. For more information and to register, visit mysticalmindsconvention.com and roll up for the Mystical Minds Convention. Step right this way.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Panache Desai, the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. As I shared in our introduction, I became a people pleaser at a very young age because through this I felt like I was accepted and I belonged. The feeling of belonging often drives people to join certain communities which may be positive or negative. How can this desire either hinder or help us to realize that we are enough?
So belonging is a fundamental human need, but the bigger issue in that is that sadly that need has been manipulated by people for their own ends. So, for example, people have had distorted lenses of perception around entire communities of individuals and have emphatically repetitively over and over again broadcast that message out to people, and it's become embedded in their subconscious, and all of a sudden everybody starts to jump on that bandwagon, and things have happened that as a species we just can't reconcile on any level. So that's the misuse of belonging. Okay, there's a way of finding belonging now that's holistic and that's loving, and that's when we begin to find belonging inside of ourselves. Because at that point, what we're doing is realizing that we're a majority of one. And wherever we are, we have ourselves. And especially in this world where now we're seeking belonging through technology and through social media and through so many other platforms and avenues, only to discover that we're more lonely than we ever have been as a species, heightened by the suicide rate and anxiety that we're feeling on a daily basis, that at some point we have to return to this place of belonging inside. And that place of belonging comes through a reunification with our essence or our soul. And that's why, for me, the message of You Are Enough is the entry point into that dimension of being human. And so what I would ask people to do is to realize that as long as you hang your hat on another's opinion, another's approval, the need for another person's love, you are always going to suffer. Even if you become successful and attain whatever there is to attain materially, you are still going to suffer. The only way to end your suffering is to turn your attention and to shift your focus back inside, and to begin to be with whatever you have inside of you. Because that reunification with your essential self is the true source of belonging. And once you have that, all of a sudden, everything in your life begins to meet you from that place of possibility and potential.
I share often that in 1970, the album Question by the British band The Moody Blues came out, and there's a line in the lead song Question, which became my personal anthem, written by Justin Hayward, in which he says, "When you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true, that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you."
Yeah. It's so powerful, and that in and of itself, what you just shared, is such a powerful, powerful entry point into the truth. Because most people will stay in relationships that are unfulfilling or that are abusive or that in some way aren't giving them the level of intimacy or connection that they would like, because they're falsely believing that the source of the love that they're feeling is outside of them. What they don't realize is that they're projecting that onto another person because they don't feel good enough inside of themselves. They're not worthy. They're not deserving. Once you begin to realize that you're enough, not only do you begin to realize that you're the source of all of the love in all of creation, but you also begin to realize that you're the source of everything. You are reunified with everything that you're trying to attain externally, internally. And at that point, it all authentically becomes yours, and it can never be taken away. It can never be questioned. It can never be challenged. Regardless of what's happening in life, you will become anchored, and you will become so firmly rooted in that you'll be able to navigate whatever life is bringing you from a place of peace and connection to the truth.
In your book, You Are Enough, you offer readers what you call the 5 commitments to guide them to authenticity. What are the 5 commitments, and how do we apply them?
So the 5 commitments for me have become 5 pillars that support us in truly living our experience and in truly embodying everything that's kind of outlined in the book. And for me, the 5 commitments in of themselves could have become their own book. But what I wanted to do was to give people a practical how-to entry point into embodying this deeper way of being. And so the first commitment is to commit to knowing your essential self. Okay, we at some point have to commit to knowing who we are at a deeper level. And that's important because everything requires a commitment. Okay. The second commitment is to commit to a new past, present, and future. So the past, present, and future that we're living inside of right now is based in fear. The version of our lives that we can access when we're reconnected to ourselves is one that's based in love. And so when we commit to a new past, present, and future from a space of love, all of a sudden everything transforms. The third commitment is to commit to inner peace. I've discovered that peace is the most precious commodity in this world. Peace is at a premium. And the more we commit to peace in the midst of every situation, in the midst of every circumstance, in the midst of whatever's playing out in life, the more we're operating and moving from a place of power. The fourth commitment is the most important, which is commit to fulfillment. You know, when we begin from a place of fulfillment, we'll end there. The reason why, even though people in this world have accomplished incredible feats, but yet are not fulfilled, is because they began from a place of deficiency. So where you start from is where you will finish. And so fulfillment has to become your commitment in order to actualize and fully realize all of the gifts and blessings of everything that you're outwardly doing in the world. And then finally, my favorite, commit to unlimited possibilities. When you're able to transcend the limited lens of your self-image, and you're able to operate and move from a place of connection to who you are, that limitless part of you, all of a sudden you begin to access greater potential and possibility than you could ever imagine. And it's not that you have to do anything. It's that you're simply aligning with life without filtering it, without muting it, without needing in some way to diminish the experience of life itself. That is how all of a sudden we're able to fully and powerfully live in this Samadhi, live in this union, and to live from our heart. Because another definition of the word Samadhi is to recognize that your heart and God's heart, the heart of the divine, the heart of the God of your understanding, are one and the same. And when there's no longer a difference at the level of love, there is oneness.
Why are these principles so important in today's world?
Because I think that we're living for things that honestly aren't meaningful. You know, we're living for external accomplishments that don't provide us the inner experience or the opening to the inner reality which we so wish to live with. You know, and in boiling it down for me to these 5 principles, you know, these commitments really powerfully support us in really having a point of reference through which we can align with the experience that we wish to have internally. So I realized that, you know, people more often than not aren't chasing things; they're chasing a feeling. You know, that they're wanting to have a feeling of joy, a feeling of fulfillment, a feeling of satisfaction, whatever that is. And these 5 commitments allow us to live life from the level of feeling that we wish to experience.
As a child, you recognize the vibrational aspect of all human beings. What happens when we all reach vibrational alignment?
We become golden. All of a sudden, our entire way of being shifts out of fear, lack, and scarcity and love, and this identity and survival into love in its purest form. That articulation of that experience that I had of that presence becomes our new normal. And we start to live from that place of love, empathy, compassion, collaboration, all of the things that we wish to see in the world, we start to naturally access from within ourselves. And the more we can do that, the more we commit to it, the more then it becomes possible, and it becomes a potential for every other human being who has yet to remember that this hidden dimension of their humanity exists within them and that they have access to it.
Can social media, which seems to be the antithesis of all we are discussing today, be turned around and become positive?
It can, and I feel like if you go to any one of my pages on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you know, what I'm broadcasting out to the world is a reflection of who I am. And that's all that's happening. So social media is nothing more than a curation of the collective unconscious of humanity. However, there are imaginal selves or points of awakening or points of remembrance that are using social media to deliver the opposite messaging into the world. And it's no accident, actually, that positivity is trending higher than fear, lack, and scarcity and separation, because we as a species are hardwired for evolution. We're hardwired for ascension. We're hardwired to live in conscious connection and communion with our magnificence. And so, yes, when you move from connection, when you engage in any platform or medium from connection, it becomes a transformative medium that can light up the world.
What message do you have for people who are struggling to find happiness and fulfillment in their lives?
You're enough. That you have whatever it is that you need inside of you. And I would focus on truly recognizing that you don't need healing, you don't need fixing, that you're not broken, and that nothing outside of you is going to bring you what you want more than anything in this world. Take the time to accept yourself. Take the time to know yourself. Take the time to love yourself. And through this exploration, you will discover that you are all that you ever needed in life.
The wisdom and truth of Panache Desai. He's the author of You Are Enough, Revealing the Soul to Discover Your Power, Potential, and Possibility. Panache, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
My book's available through all independent bookstores, so please go there first. And then it's available through Amazon, all big box retailers. You can also access it through my website, which is panachedesai.com, PANACHEDESAI.com, and there's a tab there that says book. Click there, you can download all kinds of great bonuses and begin to immerse yourself in the truth that has the capacity to transform it all.
Panache, thank you so much for joining us this week and sharing this wisdom which is so desperately needed in this world today.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for engaging in these conversations and for so lovingly committing to this message and this greater work being broadcast out into the world. I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you, and thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.